Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to The Fifth Elephant by Terry Pratchett. Part 4. Let us consider a castle from the point of view of its furniture. This one has chairs, yes, but they don't look very lived in. There is a huge sofa near the fire, and that is ragged with use. But other furnishings look as if they're there merely for show. There is a long oak table, well polished and looking curiously unused for such an old piece of furniture. Possibly the reason for this is that on the floor around it are a large number of white earthenware bowls. One of them has "Father" written on it. The Baroness Seraphine von Uberwald slammed shut Twerp's peerage irritably. "The man is a nothing," she said. "A paper man, a man of straw, an insult." "The name Vimes goes back a long time," said Wolfgang von Uberwald, who was doing one-handed press-ups in front of the fire. "So does the name Smith. What of it?" Wolf changed to the other hand in mid-air. He was naked. He liked his muscles to get an airing. They shone. Someone with an anatomical chart. Someone with an anatomical chart could have picked out every one. They might also have remarked on the unusual way his blonde hair grew not only on his head, but down and across his shoulders as well. "He's a duke, mother." "Ha! Ankh Morpork hasn't even got a king." 19, 20. "I hear stories about that, mother." "Oh, stories. Sybil writes silly little letters to me every year. Sam this, Sam that. Of course, she had to be grateful for what she could get. But the man is just a thief-taker, after all. I shall refuse to see him." "You will not do that, mother," Wolf grunted. "That would be 29, 30. Dangerous." "What do you tell Lady Sybil about us?" "Nothing. I don't write back, of course. A rather sad and foolish woman." And she still writes every year?" 36, 37. "Yes, 4 pages, usually. And that tells you everything about her you need to know. Where is your father?" A flap in the bottom of a nearby door swung back, and a large, heavy-set wolf trotted in. It glanced around the room and then shook itself vigorously. The Baroness bridled. "Guy, you know what I said! It's after 6. Change when you come in from the garden." The wolf gave her a look and strolled behind a massive oak screen at the far end of the room. There was a noise, soft and rather strange, not so much an actual sound as a change in the texture of the air. The Baron walked around from behind the screen, doing up the cord of a tattered dressing gown. The Baroness sniffed. "At least your father wears clothes," she said. "Clothes are unhealthy, mother," said Wolf calmly. "Nakedness is purity." The Baron sat down. He was a large, red-faced man, insofar as a face could be seen under the beard, hair, moustache, and eyebrows, which were engaged in a bitter four-way war over the remaining areas of bare skin. "Well," he growled, "Vimes the thief-taker from Ankh-Morpork is going to be the alleged ambassador," snapped the Baroness. "Dwarves? Of course they'll be told." The Baron sat, stared at nothing, with the same expression detritus used when a new thought was being assembled. "Bad?" he ventured at last. "Guy, I've told you about this 1,000 times," said the Baroness. "You're spending far too much time changed. You know what you're like afterwards. Supposing we had official visitors." "Bite 'em. You see? Go on off to bed and don't come down until you're fit to be human." "Vimes could ruin everything, father," said Wolfgang. He was now doing handstands using one hand. "Guy, down!" The Baron stopped trying to scratch his ear with his leg. "Do?" he said. Wolfgang's gleaming body dipped a moment as he changed hands again. "City life makes men weak. Vimes will be fun. They do say he likes running, though." He gave a little laugh. "We shall have to see how fast he is." "His wife says he's very soft-hearted." "Guy! Don't you dare do that! If you're going to do that sort of thing, do it upstairs!" The Baron looked only moderately ashamed, but readjusted his clothing anyway. "Bandits!" he said. "Yes, they could be a problem at this time of year," said Wolfgang. "At least a dozen," said the Baroness. "Yes, that should." Wolf grunted upside down. "No, mother, you are being stupid. His coach must get here safely. You understand? When he is here, that is a different matter." The Baron's massive eyebrows tangled with a thought. "Plan! King!" "Exactly." The Baroness sighed. "I don't trust that little dwarf." Wolf somersaulted onto his feet. "No, but trustworthy or not, he's all we've got. Vimes must get here with his soft heart. He may even be useful. Perhaps we should assist matters." "Why?" snapped the Baroness. "Let Ankh-Morpork look after their own." There was a knock on the door while Vimes was having breakfast. Willikins ushered in a small, thin man in neat but threadbare black clothes, whose over-large head gave him the appearance of a lolly nearing the last suck. He carried a black bowler hat the way a soldier carries his helmet, and walked like a man who had something wrong with his knees. "I am so sorry to disturb your grace." Vimes laid down his knife. He'd been peeling an orange. Sybil insisted he eat fruit. "Not your grace," he said. "Just Vimes. Sir Samuel, if you must. Are you veterinaries, man?" "Inigo Skimmer, sir." "I am to travel with you to Uberwald." "Ah, you're the clerk who's going to do all the whispering and winking while I hand around the cucumber sandwiches, are you?" "I will try to be of service, sir, although I'm not much of a winker." "Would you like some breakfast?" "I ate already, sir." Vimes looked the clerk up and down. It wasn't so much that his head was big. It was simply that someone of appeared to have squeezed the bottom half of it and forced everything up into the top. He was going bald, too, and had carefully teased the remaining strands of hair across the pink dome. It was hard to tell his age. He could be 25 and a big warrior, or a fresh-faced 40. Vimes inclined to the former. The man had the look of someone who had spent his life watching the world over the top of a book. And there was that, well, was it a nervous laugh, a giggle, an unfortunate way of clearing his throat? And that strange way he walked. Not even some toast, a piece of fruit. These oranges are fresh from Clatch. I really can recommend them. Vimes tossed one at the man. It bounced off his arm, and Skimmer took a step backwards, mildly appalled at the upper class's habit of fruit hurling. Are you all right, sir? Mm-hmm. Sorry about that, said Vimes. I was carried away by fruit. He laid aside his napkin and got up from the table, putting his arm around Skimmer's shoulder. I'll just take you into the mildly yellow drawing room where you can wait, he said, walking him towards the door and patting him on the arm in a friendly way. The coaches are loaded up. Sybil is regrouting the bathroom, learning ancient Clatchian, and doing all those other little last-minute things women always do. You're with us in the big coach. Skimmer recoiled. Oh, I couldn't do that, sir. I'll travel with your retinue. If you mean Sherry and detritus, they're in there with us, said Vimes, noting the look of horror deepened slightly. You need 4 for a decent game of cards, and the road's as boring as hell for most of the way. And, your servants? Willykins and the cook and Sybil's maid are in the other coach. Oh. Vimes smiled inwardly. He remembered the saying from his childhood. Too poor to paint, but too proud to whitewash. Bit of a tough choice, is it? He said. I'll tell you what. You can come in our coach, but we'll give you a hard seat and patronize you from time to time. How about that? I am afraid you are making a mockery of me, Sir Samuel. No, but I may be assisting. And now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to nip down to the yard to sort out a few last-minute things. A quarter of an hour later, Vimes walked into the charge room at the yard. Sergeant Strong in the Arm looked up, saluted, and then ducked to avoid the orange that was tossed at his head. Sir, he said, bewildered. Just testing, Strong in the Arm. Did I pass, sir? Oh, yes. Keep the orange. It's full of vitamins. My mother always told me those things could kill you, sir. Carrot was waiting patiently in Vimes's office. Vimes shook his head. He knew all the places to tread in the corridor he knew. He knew all the places to tread in the corridor, and he knew he didn't make a sound. And he'd never once caught Carrot reading his paperwork, not even upside down. Just once it'd be nice to catch him out at something. If the man was any straighter, you could use him as a plank. Carrot stood up and saluted. Yes, we haven't got a lot of time for that now, said Vimes, sitting behind his desk. Anything new overnight? An unattributed murder, sir. A tradesman called Wallace Sonke, found in one of his own vats with his throat cut. No guild seal or note or anything. We're treating it as suspicious. Yes, I think that sounds fairly suspicious, said Vimes. Unless he has a record as a very careless shaver. What kind of vat? Rubber, sir. Rubber comes in vats. Wouldn't he bounce out? No, sir. It's a liquid in the vat, sir. He makes rubber things. Hang on. I remember seeing something once. Don't they make things by dipping them in the rubber? You make sort of the right shapes and dip them in to get gloves, boots, that sort of thing. That sort of thing, sir. Something about Carrot's uneasy manner got through to Vimes, and the little file at the back of his brain eventually waved a card. Sonky. Carrot, we're not talking about sonky as in a packet of sonkies, are we? Now Carrot was bright red with embarrassment. Yes, sir. My gods, what was he dipping in the vat? He'd been thrown in, sir, apparently. But he's practically a national hero, sir. Captain, the housing shortage in Ankh-Morpork would be a good deal worse if it wasn't for old man Sonky and his penny-a-packet preventatives. Who'd want to do away with him? People do have views, sir, said Carrot coldly. Yes, you do, don't you? Vimes thought. Dwarves don't hold with that sort of thing. Well, put some men on it. Anything else? A carter assaulted Constable Swires last night for clamping his cart. Assault? Tried to stamp on him, sir. Vimes had a mental picture of Constable Swires, a gnome 6 inches tall, but a mile high in pent-up aggression. How is he? Well, the man can speak, but it'll be a little while before he can climb back on a cart again. Apart from that, it's all run-of-the-mill stuff. Nothing more about the scone theft? Not really. Lots of accusations in the dwarf community, but no one really knows anything. Like you say, sir, we'll probably know more when it goes bad. Any word on the street? Yes, sir. It's Halt, sir. Sergeant Cullen painted it at the top of Lower Broadway. The carters are a lot more careful now. Of course, someone has to shovel the manure off every hour or so. This whole traffic thing is not making us very popular, Captain. No, sir, but we aren't popular anyway, and at least it's bringing in money for the city treasury. There is another thing, sir. Yes? Have you seen Sergeant Angua, sir? Me? No, I was expecting her to be here. Then Vimes noticed just the very edge of concern in Carrot's voice. Something wrong? She didn't turn up for duty last night. It wasn't full moon, so it's a bit odd. Nobby said she was rather concerned about something when they were on duty the other day. Vimes nodded. Of course, most people were concerned about something if they were on duty with Nobby. They tended to look at clocks a lot. Have you been to her lodgings? Her bed hadn't been slept in, said Carrot. Or her basket either, he added. Well, I can't help you there, Carrot. She's your girlfriend. She's been a bit worried about the future, I think, said Carrot. The werewolf thing? Vimes stopped, acutely embarrassed. It preys on her mind, said Carrot. Perhaps she's just gone somewhere to think about things. Like, how on earth could she go out with a young man who, magnificent though he was, blushed at the idea of a packet of sonkies? That's what I hope, sir, Carrot said. She does that sometimes. It's really quite stressful, being a werewolf in a big city. I know we'd have heard if she'd run into any trouble. There was the sound of a harness outside and the rattle of a coach. Vimes was relieved. Seeing Carrot worried was so unusual that it had the shock of the unfamiliar. "Well, we'll have to go without her," he said. "I want to be kept in touch about everything, Captain. A fake scone gone missing a week or two before a big dwarf coronation. That sounds like another shoe is about to drop, and it might just hit me. And while you're about it, put the word out that I'm to be sent anything about Sonky, will you? I don't like mysteries. The Clacks do a skeleton service as far as Uberwald now, don't they?" Carrot brightened up. "It's wonderful, sir, isn't it? In a few months, they say we'll be able to send messages all the way from Ankh-Morpork to Genua in less than a day. Yes, indeed. I wonder if by then we'll have anything sensible to say to each other." Lord Veterinary stood at his window, watching the semaphore tower on the other side of the river. All 8 of the big shutters facing him were blinking furiously. Black, white, white, black, white. Information was flying into the air. 20 miles behind him, on another tower in Stowe Lat, someone was looking through a telescope and shouting out numbers. How quickly the future comes upon us, he thought. He always suspected the poetic description of time like an ever-rolling stream. Time, in his experience, moved more like rocks, sliding, pressing, building up force underground, and then, with one jerk that shakes the crockery, a whole field of turnips mysteriously slips sideways by 6 feet. Semaphore had been around for centuries, and everyone knew that knowledge had a value, and everyone knew that exporting goods was a way of making money. And then, suddenly, someone realized how much money you could make by exporting to Genua by tomorrow, things known in Ankh-Morpork today. And some bright young man in the street of cunning artificers had been unusually cunning. Knowledge, information, power, words flying through the air, invisible. And suddenly the world was tap dancing on quicksand. In that case, the prize went to the best dancer. Lord Veterinary turned away, took some papers from a desk drawer, walked to a wall, touched a certain area, and stepped quickly through the hidden door that noiselessly swung open. Beyond was a corridor, lit by borrowed light from high windows and paved with small flagstones. He walked forward, hesitated, said, "No, this is Tuesday," and moved his descending foot so that it landed on a stone that in every respect appeared to be exactly the same as its fellows. Footnote 9. Except that the ones around it were not good stones to tread on if it was a Tuesday. End footnote 9. Anyone overhearing his progress along the passages and stairs might have caught muttered phrases on the lines of, "The moon is waxing," and "Yes, it is before noon." A really keen listener would have heard the faint whirring and ticking inside the walls. A really keen and paranoid listener would have reflected that anything Lord Veterinary said aloud, even while he was alone, might not be totally worth believing. Not certainly if your life depended on it. Eventually, he reached a door, which he unlocked. There was a large attic room beyond, suddenly airy and bright, and cheerful with sunlight from the windows and the roof. It seemed to be a cross between a workshop and a storeroom. Several bird skeletons hung from the ceiling, and there were a few other bones on the work tables, along with coils of wire and metal springs and tubes of paint and more tools, many of them probably unique than you normally saw in any one place. Only a narrow bed wedged between a thing like a loom with wings and a large bronze statue suggested that someone actually lived here. They were clearly someone who was obsessively interested in everything. What interested Lord Veterinary right now was the device all by itself on a table in the middle of the room. It looked like a collection of copper balls balanced on one another. Steam was hissing gently from a few rivets, and occasionally the device went bloop. Your lordship. Veterinary looked around. A hand was waving desperately at him from behind an upturned bench. And something made him look up as well. The ceiling above him was crusted with some brownish substance, which hung from it like stalactites. Bloop! With quite surprising speed, the patrician was behind the bench. Leonard of Quirm smiled at him from underneath his homemade protective helmet. I do apologize, he said. I'm afraid I wasn't expecting anyone to come in. I'm sure it will work this time. However, bloop! What is it? Said Veterinary. Bloop! I'm not quite sure, but I hope it's a... And then it was, suddenly, too noisy to talk. Leonard of Quirm never dreamed that he was a prisoner. If anything, he was grateful to Veterinary for giving him this airy workspace, and regular meals and laundry, and protecting him from those people who for some reason always wanted to take his perfectly innocent inventions designed for the betterment of mankind and use them for despicable purposes. It was amazing how many of them there were, both the people and the inventions. It was as if all the genius of a civilization had funneled into one head, which was, therefore, in a constant state of highly inventive spin. Veterinary often speculated upon the fate of mankind should Leonard keep his mind on one thing for more than an hour or so. The rushing noise died away. Bloop! Leonard peered cautiously over the bench and smiled broadly. Ah, happily, we appear to have achieved coffee, he said. Coffee? Leonard walked over to the table and pulled a small lever on the device. A light brown foam cascaded into a waiting cup with a noise like a clogged drain. Different coffee, he said. Very fast coffee. I rather think you will like it. I'm calling this the Very Fast Coffee Machine. And that's today's invention, is it? Said Veterinary. Well, yes. It would have been a scale model of a device for reaching the moon and other celestial bodies, but I was thirsty. How fortunate. Lord Veterinary carefully removed an experimental pedal-powered shoe polishing machine from a chair and sat down. "And I've brought you some more little messages." Leonard almost clapped his hands. "Oh, good! And I finished the other ones you gave me last. And I finished the other ones you gave me last night." Lord Veterinary carefully removed a moustache of frothy coffee from his upper lip. "I beg your... all of them. You broke the ciphers on all those messages from Uberwald?" "Oh, they were quite easy after I'd finished the new device," said Leonard, rummaging through the piles of paper on a bench and handing the patrician several closely written sheets. But once you realize that there are only a limited number of birth dates a person can have, and that person do tend to think the same way, and that people do tend to think the same way, ciphers are really not very hard." "You mentioned a new device," said the patrician. "Oh, yes, the thingy. It's all very crude at the moment, but it suffices for these simple codes." Leonard pulled a sheet off something vaguely rectangular. It seemed to Veterinary to be all wooden wheels and long, thin spars, which he saw when he moved closer were inscribed thickly with letters and numbers. A number of the wheels were not round but oval or heart-shaped or some other curious curve. When Leonard turned a handle, the whole thing moved with a complex oiliness quite disquieting in something merely mechanical. "And what are you calling it?" "Oh, you know me and names, my lord. I think of it as the engine for the neutralizing of information by the generation of miasmic alphabets. But I appreciate that it does not exactly roll off the tongue. Yes, Leonard. It's not wrong, is it, reading other people's messages?" Veterinary sighed. The worried man in front of him, who was so considerate of life that he carefully dusted around spiders, had once invented a device that fired lead pellets with tremendous speed and force. He thought it would be useful against dangerous animals. He'd designed a thing that could destroy whole mountains. He thought it would be useful in the mining industries. Here was a man who, in his tea break, would doodle an instrument for unthinkable mass destruction in the blank spaces around an Here was a man who, in his tea break, would doodle an instrument for unthinkable mass destruction in the blank spaces around an exquisite drawing of the fragile beauty of the human smile, with a list of numbered parts. And if you taxed him with it, he'd say, "Ah, but such a thing would make war completely impossible, you see, because no one would dare use it." Leonard brightened up as a thought apparently struck him. "But, on the other hand, the more we know about one another, the more we will learn to understand. Now, you asked me to construct some more ciphers for you. I'm sorry, my lord, but I must have misunderstood your requirements. What was wrong with the first ones I did?" Veterinary sighed. "I'm afraid they were unbreakable, Leonard. But surely..." "It's hard to explain," said Veterinary, aware that what to him were the lucid waters of politics were so much mud to Leonard. "These new ones you have are merely devilishly difficult. You specified fiendishly, sir, said Leonard, looking worried. Oh, yes. There does not appear to be a common standard for fiends, my lord, but I did some research in the more accessible occult texts, and I believe these ciphers will be considered difficult by more than 96% of fiends. Good. They may perhaps verge on the diabolically difficult in places. That's not a problem. I shall use them forthwith. Leonard still seemed to have something on his mind. It would be so easy to make them arch-demonically difficult. But these will suffice, Leonard, said Veterinary. My lord, Leonard almost wailed, I really cannot guarantee that sufficiently clever people will be unable to read your messages. Good. But, my lord, they will know what you are thinking. Veterinary patted him on the shoulder. No, Leonard. They will merely know what is in my messages. I really do not understand, my lord. No. But, on the other hand, I cannot make exploding coffee. What would the world be like if we were all alike? Leonard's face clouded for a moment. I'm not sure, he said. But if you'd like me to work on the problem, I may be able to devise It was merely a figure of speech, Leonard. Veterinary shook his head ruefully. It often seemed to him that Leonard, who had pushed intellect into hitherto undiscovered uplands, had discovered there large and specialized pockets of stupidity. What would be the point of ciphering messages that very clever enemies couldn't break? You'd end up not knowing what they thought you thought they were thinking. There was one rather strange message from Uberwald, my lord, said Leonard. Yesterday morning. Strange? It was not ciphered. Not at all. I thought everyone used codes. Oh, the sender and the recipient are code names, but the message is quite plain. It was a request for information about Commander Vimes, of whom you have often spoken. Lord Veterinary went quite still. The return message was mostly clear, too. A certain amount of gossip. All about Vimes. Yesterday morning, before My lord? Tell me, said the patrician. This message from Uberwald. It yields no clue at all to the sender. Sometimes, like a ray of light through clouds, Leonard could be quite perceptive. You think you might know the originator, my lord? Oh, in my younger days I spent some time in Uberwald, said the patrician. In those days, rich young men from Ankh-Morpork used to go on what we call the Grand Sneer, visiting far-flung countries and cities in order to see at first hand how inferior they were, or so it seemed at any rate. Oh yes, I spent some time in Uberwald. It was not often that Leonard of Quirm paid attention to what people around him were doing, but he saw the faraway look in Lord Veterinary's eye. You have fond memories, my lord? He ventured. Oh, she was a very unusual lady, but alas, rather older than me, said Veterinary. Much older, I have to say, but it was a long time ago. Life teaches us its small lessons, and we move on. There was that distant look again. Well. And no doubt the lady is now dead, said Leonard. He was not much good at this sort of conversation. "Oh, I very much doubt that," said Veterinary. "I have no doubt she thrives." He smiled. The world was becoming more interesting. "Tell me, Leonard," he said, "has it ever occurred to you that one day wars will be fought with brains?" Leonard picked up his coffee cup. "Oh dear, won't that be rather messy?" he said. Veterinary sighed again. "Not perhaps as messy as the other sort," he said, trying the coffee. It really was rather good. The ducal coach rolled past the last of the outlying buildings on and on to the vast, flat Stowe plains. Sherry and Detritus had tactfully decided to ride on the top for the morning, leaving the Duke and Duchess alone inside. Skimmer was indulging in some uneasy class solidarity and riding with the servants for a while. "Angua seems to have gone into hiding," said Vimes, watching the cabbage fields pass by. "Poor girl," said Sybil. "The city's not really the place for her." "Well, you couldn't winkle Carrot out of it with a big pin," said Vimes. "And that's the problem, I suppose." "Part of the problem," said Sybil. Vimes nodded. The other part, which no one talked about, was children. Sometimes it seemed to Vimes that everyone knew that Carrot was the true heir to the redundant throne of the city. It just so happened that he didn't want to be. He wanted to be a copper, and everyone went along with the idea. But kingship was a bit like a grand piano. You could put a cover over it, but you could still see what shape it was underneath. Vimes wasn't sure what you got if a human and a werewolf had kids. Possibly you just got someone who had to shave twice a day around full moon and occasionally felt like chasing carts. And when you remembered what some of the city's rulers had been like, a known werewolf as ruler ought to hold no terrors. It was the buggers who looked human all the time that were the problem. That was just his view, though. Other people might see things differently. No wonder she'd gone off to think about things. He realized he was looking, unseeing, out of the window. To take his mind off this, he opened the package of papers that Skimmer had handed him just as he got on the coach. It was called Briefing Material. The man seemed to be an expert on Uberwald, and Vimes wondered how many other clerks there were in the patrician's palace, beavering away, becoming experts. He settled down gloomily and began to read. The first page showed the crest of the unholy empire that had once ruled most of the huge country. Vimes couldn't recall much about it, except that one of the emperors once had a man's hat nailed to his head for a joke. Uberwald seemed to be a big, cold, depressing place, so perhaps people would do anything for a laugh. The crest was altogether too florid for Vimes's taste, and was dominated by a double-headed bat. The first document was entitled "The Fat-Bearing Strata of the Schmalzberg Region, the Land of the Fifth Elephant." He knew the legend, of course. There had once been 5 elephants, not 4, standing on the back of great Artuin. But one had lost its footing or had been shaken loose and had drifted off into a curved orbit before eventually crashing down 1,000,000,000 tons of enraged pachyderm with a force that had rocked the entire world and split it up into the continents people know today. Pachyderm. Any of various non-ruminant mammals, such as an elephant, a rhinoceros, or a hippopotamus, of a formal group, Pachydermata, that have hooves or nails resembling hooves and usually thick skin. Pachyderm. But one had lost its footing or had been shaken loose and had drifted off into a curved orbit before eventually crashing down 1,000,000,000 tons of enraged pachyderm with a force that had rocked the entire world and split it up into the continents people know today. The rocks that fell back had covered and compressed the corpse, and the rest, after millennia of underground cooking and rendering, was a fat history. According to legend, gold and iron and all the other metals were also part of the carcass. After all, an elephant big enough to support the world on its back wasn't going to have ordinary bones, was it? The notes in front of him were a little more believable, talking about some unknown catastrophe that had killed millions of the mammoths, bison, and giant shrews, and then covered them over, pretty much like the 5th elephant in the story. There were notes about old troll sagas and legends of the dwarves. Possibly ice had been involved, or a flood. In the case of the trolls, who were believed to be the first species in the world, maybe they'd been there and seen the elephant trumpeting across the sky. The result, anyway, was the same. Everyone except Vimes, knew the best fat came from the Schmaltzberg wells and mines. It made the whitest, brightest candles and the creamiest soap, the hottest, cleanest lamp oil. The yellow tallow from Ankh-Morpork's boilers didn't come close. Vimes didn't see the point. Gold, now that was important. People died for it. And iron. Ankh-Morpork needed iron. Timber too. Stone even. Silver now was very... He flicked back to a page headed Natural Resources, and under silver read, "Silver has not been mined in Uberwald since the diet of bugs in AM 1880, and the possession of the metal is technically illegal." There was no explanation. He made a note to ask Inigo. After all, where you got werewolves, didn't you need silver? And things must have been pretty bad if everyone had to eat insects. Anyway, silver was useful too, but fat was just fat. It was like biscuits, or tea, or sugar. It was just something that turned up in the cupboard. There was no style to it, no romance. It was stuff in tubs. A note was clipped to the next page. He read, "The 5th elephant as a metaphor also appears in the Uberwald languages. Depending on context, it can mean a thing that does not exist, as we would say, Clatchian mist. a thing that is other than it seems, and a thing that, while unseen, controls events. In the same way that we would use the term eminence gris. I wouldn't, thought Vimes. I don't use words like that.